Okay, I can see some people are signing in now, Jessica, and public participation comes down in the agenda a little. So I think we'll just get started since it's 7
You're
o'clock.
good. We're good to
Okay,
go. Yeah.
all right. Welcome everybody to the Police Community Relations and Review Commission meeting here in August. We have a number of things in our agenda to take care of. First, some business items, and then we'll have public participation a little about the middle of the meeting. I'm going to try to keep this within a couple hours or less to respect people's time. You know, people have many things to do, but we do not want to discourage any of the public who has something they want to bring up from doing that. Okay, so I'll call the meeting to order. And Jessica, would you mind calling the roll for us tonight? I can do it.
Okay, I was like,
I saw that
write
face.
down the agenda, but I can.
That's all right. I saw that face. I will do it. Okay. I will preside and call the roll.
Okay, great.
But we'll have to figure this out in the future.
I'd be
Okay.
happy. You know what? I can see everybody. I can do it now. So I can go ahead.
Yeah, there's only, it looks like there's 6 of us here. So what we'll do is we'll do it when we approve the agenda, which is the first thing on our agenda here. All
I
right.
can call the roll now if you'd like.
Okay, go ahead. All right. So
Okay. Hannah Story. Deirdre DeLong.
Here.
Larry Nadler.
Here.
Egon Cron.
Present.
Amber Franklin.
Here.
And Patrick Mead.
here. So we are
I
missing.
believe Amin Wong is missing, I believe.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. Hopefully all the members got the agenda and all the attachments with it that we're looking at tonight. So the first item is to approve the agenda. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
Motion made.
All right. Thank you, Larry. And a second?
Second.
Thank you, Egon. Jessica, could you call the roll to approve the agenda?
Yes. Miss Story.
Yes.
Miss Franklin.
Yes.
Mr. Cron.
Yes.
Mr. Nadler.
Yes.
Ms. DeLong.
Aye.
And Mr. Mead.
Yes. All right, and then the next business item is the approval of the minutes from the June 11th Police Community Relations and Review Commission. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda? I mean, the
Motion made.
minutes. Thank you, Deirdre. And a second, please.
Second.
Thank you. Can you call the roll again, Jessica?
Yes. Mr. Nadler.
Yes.
Ms. DeLong.
Aye.
Ms. Franklin.
Yes.
Mr. Cron.
Yes.
Miss Story.
Yes.
And Mr. Mead.
Yes. Okay, then the third item before we go to public participation is the approval of our yearly report. Hopefully everyone on the commission got that report, had a chance to read it over. I do worry a little because I didn't get any editing comments back, and since I typed a lot of it, that worries me somewhat. Usually someone out there finds some of my mistakes. But what we'll do is take a motion in a second, and then we'll have discussion before we take a vote in case anybody had anything, any input they wanted to give on that before we approved it. If we approve it tonight, we'll be on the city council agenda September 1st. We have to once a year present a yearly report to them, and we'll do that September 1st. So can I get a motion to approve the yearly report?
So moved.
Thank you, Larry. In a second?
Second.
Thank you, Amber. Can you call the roll, Jessica, please? Or no, sorry. Is there any discussion first? Does anybody have any comments about the yearly report or anything that was in it? The introduction was pretty standard. It's the same introduction we've used all 4 years. And then, of course, it went through and summarized each of the meetings a little so council would know what we talked about without having to read the minutes from everything. And then at the end, it gives some conclusions and some goals for next year. So is there any discussion on any of this before we approve it and go to council next, or 2 weeks from now, week and a half?
Yes, I was looking at the end where we have some of the goals you mentioned, pedestrian and bicycle stops, getting more data on that. And I was looking at the Ohio Collaborative Standard on Bias-Free Policing, and I believe the term that's generally used for that are field contacts. So
Field
maybe we can include field contacts. That's, I think, a more broad term for anything that's outside of traffic stops.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yes, Deirdre.
I'm sorry, I didn't have anything.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay,
Um,
I'd like to add one more thing. If, as a goal, if we can add, looking at the officer-initiated traffic stop data more specifically, so going down to the reason for the stop by race.
Okay, so you're looking that maybe in the next year we can work on determining ways we can get more specific data about traffic stops, the initial reason for the stop,
Yes,
as opposed to just what ends up happening. You know, there's a citation at the end for whatever, but the initial reasoning. And we can talk with the Chief Jones and OPD about that in the coming year, but certainly we can add that in. Because, you know, I think we've done goals in the past, and I think sometimes as a commission, and that's, you know, a lot of that is on me, we have not kept sight of those goals as we went through the next 4 meetings, or however many meetings we have. So I will try to do a better job as we present this to council and we say these are our goals, that I will make sure they get on the agendas in the upcoming year so that we can at least address them and see if we can accomplish it. Okay, anything else on the yearly report?
I don't know if these are necessarily goals, but I know that they're things that I'm following up on during our meetings. And one of those is that on the use of force reports is that I'll continue to ask and explore about including officer race, age, and sex, in addition to what's already there for civilians, age, race, and sex. And then I know that previously it had been a goal to invite PCRC to the diversity trainings. I don't know that that's on here, but I know that that's something that I'll continue to ask about as an opportunity to continue to engage in trying to understand how OPD does some of those trainings. And I know that Lieutenant Robinson had invited us to some, but I think I couldn't attend because it was closed registration by the time I got it. Let me see. And then I think all the other things were listed in the desired future meeting agenda topics. So I think that's all of my comments for that.
Okay. Does anybody have any other issues or things that they think we ought to put in there? So if I add the 3 things mentioned, what I'll look for then is a motion to approve the yearly report as amended. So can I have a motion to approve the yearly report as amended?
Yes.
Thank you, Hannah. And a second?
Second.
second,
Thank you, Larry. All right. Jessica, could you call with roll?
Yes, Mr. Long,
Aye.
Ms. Franklin,
aye,
Mr. Nadler,
Yes.
Mr. Cron,
Yes.
Ms. Story,
Yes.
Mr. Mead.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So that we will present, will be on the agenda September 1st at the city council meeting to present that. And I'm willing to do that since I do it by Zoom. That makes it easy. And if anybody else wants to tune in that night and maybe chip in additional comments, I'll probably focus with them on the goals as opposed to going over the minutes of all our meetings. We'll focus on our accomplishments and the goals. that we have set for the commission. Okay, at this time, before we go on with the rest of the agenda, which is the discussion of the pamphlet about Know Your Rights and a discussion about the proposals put forth to City Council by Black Lives Matter group here in Oxford. Those are the two other agenda items. We'll now take public participation. So if anybody in the public wants to comment on those two agenda items and or anything else about policing in Oxford, I believe what you'll need to do if you're an attendee on the Zoom call is raise your hand, and Jessica Green is going to moderate for us. And we'll basically listen to you and take notes, and then afterwards the commission and Chief Jones may respond to some of what's been brought up, or we might save our response to that point in the agenda if it's about the two items on the agenda. Okay, so please raise your hand and Jessica, take over for us.
Mr. Mead, I just want to clarify that we're doing all public comment now and then not throughout the meeting. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So if you are a login user, you can just click the raise hand button. If you are a call-in user, like on your phone, and you want to speak, you can press *9. All right, first one, I see a Miss Marsh. Miss Marsh, you're unmuted.
Good evening, everyone. I am here to voice my concern. I heard a few weeks back, I believe it was at the City Council meeting, that in order to file a complaint with the police department, it needed to be notarized. And in my mind, I think that that's a huge roadblock. I think in terms of keeping up a conversation, I think I understand the need to notarize in the case of, moving forward, but I do believe that there's information that an anonymous complaint can supply, especially if there are, for example, repeat offenses that different people have provided. So I think that having only one route, one road to file a complaint, and then that's notarized. And if anybody's been Oxford Talk, there are regular questions of where and how do I find a notary? I think that that's a huge roadblock that at the very least, there should be a second option to provide information and to say, it might even be a minor issue, but just in order to collect that information and to, for me personally, make it feel like there is a more accessible conversation. Having something notarized makes it feel very inaccessible. So thank you.
Thank you.
Next,
Jess-
we have Miss Shaman. Miss Shaman, go ahead.
Hi, thank you. My name is Amy Shaman. I both reside in the city of Oxford and work in the city of Oxford. A couple of things. One, thank you to Chief and the commission members for all that you do, for getting together, for being willing to hear and hear each other and work towards a participatory process. I very much appreciate that from both sides. I have two questions and a comment. Well, my comment's also a question, but one, I am wondering if when you track, when you're taking a report of some kind and you look at things like race, gender, and then what happens, what are the options for gender? Is there any option for someone who is gender nonconforming, or are the only options male and female? And Chief Jones, perhaps is something to put on the future discussion list if there isn't an easy answer tonight. Do officers ever ask somebody what gender they go by? Because I might appear to be one, but identify as another, or not really pick one or the other. So that's one question. Two, I am wondering from anyone on the commission or the chief, the goals for the next year. Is that the calendar year? Is there a specific date? Is there a point at which there's a place where there's some accountability within the group or from outside the group to say, hey, we made this goal, we've had this goal for X amount of time, we need to find a way to achieve it? And then my third is more of a process question, and perhaps this is because this is my first meeting, and you all know me, I'm not shy. I'm wondering, in the balance of between the commission members and the chief and the decisions that the chief makes with his leadership, where does this group lie? Is this advisory, or are there moments when a decision of this group becomes obligatory for the police department? I'm thinking, I read through the summary document. Thank you for making that publicly available. And I noticed that in the notes from the May meeting that there had been the comments about traffic stop data, officer initiated, excuse me, traffic stop data, that there was discussion of it and a request for it in May of 2016 and February 16th of 2017, and that there wasn't the ability to collect the data, I think is what I'm reading there, on those dates. But on the very next day, it was suggested by the state, and therefore it was done. Now, that my therefore is an assumption, but that's how the document is reading to me. So please feel free to correct me. So is this group, do they have some advisory authority, or is it more opportunity for community relations and hearing from residents? So thank you for letting me ask those questions. I appreciate this group, and thanks for giving the public comment time.
Thank you. Next, we have, I see two on one call. So I have Mr. Humphrey, and it looks like a Miss Noft. Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. This is Brandon Humphrey. I live at 609 Ogden Court here in Oxford. I'm here today as a representative and co-leader of Black Lives Matter Oxford, Ohio. For once, I don't really have any prepared remarks, but I just wanted to express my excitement that and appreciation that our letter to City Council is on the agenda tonight. I especially want to thank Pat Mead for leading the PCRC here. And I'd also just like to say that, you know, if it's appropriate, you know, I and other members of Black Lives Matter who I think are on the call today, so Katie Knoft, Justin Fain, Justin Chandler, Shauna Rosenberg, and Priyana Kalita, we are all happy to answer any questions that the PCRC might have about this letter, either during the meeting or, you know, if you would like to follow up with Black Lives Matter at some point in the future. We're just really excited to be working on this. So, and for y'all to be working on this. So we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rosenberg, go ahead.
Shauna, you're muted.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so I said a bunch. Basically what I said was thank you for having me here tonight. It's great. I'm really happy that Black Lives Matter Oxford's proposals to City Council have made it to your commission. You know, there's a lot that you're going to talk about from that. It sounds like some of the things are being worked on in the background that we have proposed already. But just want to say, you know, for the record, that not only is police reform and changing the model of policing in the community something that will help with racial justice, it's something that will help everyone in the community. So what I would really love to see from tonight is that you have a robust discussion about the proposals, in particular, the third proposal, which talks about the CAHOOTS model and the reasons that, you know, we presented the CAHOOTS model, which is that there's, you know, problems with addiction and things that require social services, all sorts of things, even a locked car where a officer with a gun does not need to come out to those situations. You know, you have some automatic de-escalation when there is not that show of force. So thank you again for listening to my words. I really look forward to hearing your discussion about the proposals tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. As a reminder, if you're a called-in user and you want to speak, press *9. Here we go. You know what? I think this number is Miss Ragu. I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead. The call-in user, you're unmuted. Well, we're trying to unmute you.
Hear me?
Yep, now we can. Go ahead. Thank you.
Hey, it's Chantel. It's Chantel Ragu. Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks to the committee for reviewing what has been brought forward to City Council, or what will be brought forward to City Council. I think this is really important work, and I think ultimately what we're all looking at is the very same goal of safety. We all want to feel safe in our community, and I know that there's this traditional way that most of us view safety, but I think that there's a bunch of different ways that we can try to be as inclusive as possible and making sure that we're making sure the whole community feels as safe as possible. So I think that, going forward, I hope that we all realize that we're all on the same team, just trying to rope more people into that team. But thanks again.
Thank you. Okay, I'm looking for any other raised hands. That would be the button at the bottom of your screen, or if you're a call-in user, *9. Okay, Miss Rosenberg, you raised your hand again?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
I did. I apologize. I actually came to say a certain thing, and I will say it now because I've had a long day apparently. But one of the proposals in Black Lives Matter's letter is that the proposals get researched, and alternative ways to fund the police department and help the community be researched. So I raised my hand again just to say that it would be great if your proposal to recommendation to City Council is that a committee be formed to do that research. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Okay, do we have anyone else, Jessica?
I'm looking. I do. Hold on. Mr. Bracken, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if this will be the only chance tonight for public participation. It sounded like I heard that earlier, but I just wanted to confirm whether that's accurate. Thank you.
Yes, that is accurate. We'll go on with the 2 agenda items after everyone's had a chance to say things that are on the agenda or not on the agenda.
Okay, so to clarify, we're not going to allow public comment later during the meeting?
Correct.
Okay, so anyone else like to raise their hand? I am not seeing any at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Jessica. I think what we'll do first before we go on with the Know Your Rights and the letter to City Council with proposals is maybe Chief Jones or I can quickly answer some of the issues that came up so that people get them addressed right away. The first one by Mrs. Marsh about things being notarized, I think is addressed will be addressed in our discussion about the letter, because part of that deals with complaint procedures. So that will be addressed. Now, Ms. Shaman's question about gender options, Chief, I don't know if you want to take that real quickly, because we've talked before about how when officers approach a stop, that they don't ask people race or ethnicity. They kind of make their best judgment because they don't want to be doing that. So Chief, do you think you could answer that quickly, or Egon, you got something there?
Yeah, because I think I've voiced my thoughts on that one. You know, the reason that we are asking that you know, officers make their judgment in you know, race and gender is because, you know, if we're trying to study bias by police, we want to know what they feel or who they feel that they are you know, stopping, not who they're really stopping. You know, I mean, and I've made the example, I believe myself, that you know, I am from Mexican origin, but if you look at me, I do not appear Mexican, and I would not expect a police officer to, you know, treat me as anything other than white. So that is, you know, so that's the reason that that, you know, I think it's up to the, you know, the officer's discretion to make note of what they believe, who they believe that they're stopping, so that, you know, because the bias is not on who's being stopped, is, if there's bias, is on who's doing the stopping. So that is, you know, the reason that I think it should be up to the officer's discretion.
Do you have anything to add, Chief Jones?
Sure, I'll just do my best to answer Ms. Shaman's question. As far as options for gender, no, we have in our report fields, it's only sex, and it's male, female. We have no other option. We use driver's license data typically, and so we use what's on that driver's license. I would say I don't know that I've ever asked anyone in my history of being a police officer if they were male, female. But I guess if the officer needs to know and doesn't know, they probably would just ask. So yeah, that's not something we have went down that road yet. So we're based on our software, we just have sex in there. So, and then the other question, which maybe Mr. Mead, you might also jump in on, was advisory or obligatory. I believe the way the ordinance is set up, you're advisory to the police chief for the most part. I don't have the ordinance in front of me, but she referred back to the traffic stop data, and that was something the commission was wanting, basically, right? You know, I think early on when you first got started, and we had been discussing that and the obstacles to it. And then the Ohio Collaborative, we are part of that, and we try to maintain our certification. And so during that conversation, the Ohio Collaborative came out with some standards on traffic stop data. So it was soon after that that in order to meet the collaborative, we were going to have to meet, we were going to have to collect that data. So we started working on a way to do that. And then we're able to do that for the, you know, once the collaborative took effect that following year, I think it was. So while it's advisory and not necessarily obligatory, I mean, certainly the police chief answers. That doesn't mean that something the commission says isn't taken into account, because the police chief answers to the city manager. The city manager's answers to city council. So, I mean, this commission does have a lot of influence over policy and direction of the police department. And I think we do a pretty good job of responding. So I think that's the answer to that question. Would you concur, Mr. Mead?
I would agree. We were set up as an advisory commission to city council and the administration and the police department. And I think what maybe she was referring to was that, because she mentioned a state agency or something, but I think she was pointing out we had asked 2 years for something, right. And it wasn't until this Ohio Collaborative, which she didn't name, it said you should do it to be part of this, that we got it. So I think maybe she was wondering how much of advice, you know, we could come from. But I was on a Zoom meeting with the NAACP State Committee for Policing and Criminal Justice Reform, and one of the members on that is also part of the Ohio Collaborative. And we had in someone from the state Department of Justice or something, and he helped write some of the Ohio Collaborative stuff. So I was able to give him input on our next push, which was to get Stop Dead on pedestrian and what Amber pointed out are called field contacts because I think we've been pushing for that. To answer Ms. Shaman's question, kind of, we've been trying to advise for that. But if we can get someone else to help us advise for that, I don't mind, making contacts and getting other people to help advise for that. And it's hopefully the Ohio Collaborative steps up and it expands things, but I know that's a whole another ballgame. I'm always saying Oxford should lead the way. We should do things before other communities do things because we're Oxford and we ought to do that. And the last question Ms. Shaman asked was our goals. And really, we put those in a couple of our yearly reports and then duly forgot them like all good institutions and committees. But I'm making a promise not to do that this year. And the goals go kind of from this meeting through when we write the yearly report the next year. So we run on our own calendar kind of from this meeting forward. The goals listed in our yearly report are what we're going to try to accomplish by next August. And I guess who's going to hold us accountable for that would be ourselves and the community. Hopefully, the people listening in and the people who listen in the city council and the people who read our yearly report hold us accountable to at least make progress on those goals, bring those things up, see where the police department and the commission and the city can respond to things that have come up in the community. And so, Ms. Shaman, I guess you have to keep us accountable and others to answer that question. And I don't think anything else that came up in the public comment were really questions. There were things we're going to talk about in the agenda itself with the proposals put forth by Black Lives Matter Oxford. Unless someone else on the group felt there was something I missed that could be answered, Hannah?
This is just a follow-up question on the question that was asked about the options for selection. I know that we had discussed this in our commission meetings before, but Chief Jones, do you think that the way that law enforcement does the reporting and recording will change to allow for more options other than the binary choices?
Well, I don't know. I mean, that kind of comes back to, it seems like we aren't responding to the local commission, but to the Ohio Collaborative. And that's not really what's happening, although it may seem that way. But when you have a state agency like Ohio Collaborative saying, we want this data, well, that puts pressure on software companies to go out and upgrade their systems, right? Like there's a whole law enforcement automated database in Ohio that we don't control. So I think I understand what Mr. Mead's saying. Oxford has to lead the way, but we can only, I can't change the state database on how those things are recorded. And I can't, TriTech is our software company, and we subscribe to them through the sheriff's office, because we're on the sheriff's office software. So it's an economic situation as well. If all the money in the world's allotted to us, we can make everything we want, right? So I don't know. I honestly don't know, Hannah, like if that is something that'll come down the road, or I'm honestly not as educated in that area enough, to know if that's something that will ever change in law enforcement. Certainly if that's pertinent to the situation, the incident, that can all be described in the narrative of of what's happening. So, but as far as a field that's designated and all the data that we dump to the state, it's going to take more than the Oxford Police Department calling up the governor and asking for it.
Chief, thank you for clarifying that because that's something I had not thought of. And that's why we have you at all the meetings, because you know things that we don't know. And so that's a very good point about the software being developed and, you know, us having boxes to check within it. So I appreciate that information. Okay, anything else from the commission members about what was brought up that isn't on the agenda further? And certainly, you know, maybe in the future we could put gender issues on an agenda to talk about how Oxford police officers are trained to respond if someone points out to them how they want to be referred to. We could talk about that at some later date, because in my mind, that's more important about treating that person with respect and dignity than checking a box, which we're looking for data, which tells us what the officer thought, as Egon pointed out. Okay, if there's nothing else, we'll go on with the agenda. The Know Your Rights pamphlet that Chief Jones has. And Hannah, I know that you provided him with a lot of feedback. So and I don't know if anybody else in the commission did as much feedback as you did, but I may give it to you, Chief, to present this and talk about what you have so far. And then we'll see if other commission members have feedback.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen so I can bring the pamphlet up. All right, can you guys see the pamphlet there?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, Mr. Mead, this is a pamphlet that I believe you brought to us from maybe Middletown Police and wanted us to work on doing something like this. And so we put together a rough draft and then sent it out, and then Miss Story went through and edited it for us and made the language much better and made suggestions that we tried to incorporate. So I think we were able to incorporate most of the suggestions. Office Manager Amy Gabbard worked hard on this and got it put together. You'll notice where there's underlines, those are links. So this is kind of the way we presented it, is a joint pamphlet between the PC-RRC, supported by the Division of Police. And it's kind of, it talks a little bit about the commission and then what to do if you believe the officer acted inappropriately or violated your constitutional rights. You'll notice hyperlinks that are in the pamphlet. Obviously, on a printed pamphlet, those hyperlinks don't mean anything. But you know, I would envision this being on our website or shared on social media, and folks could connect through these hyperlinks. So this is the front, the one side of the pamphlet talks about what to do if an officer comes to your home, kind of explains why an officer might be asking to search and, you know, when a warrant's needed. It talks about following the officer's instructions, but understanding you're not compelled to speak or answer the officer's questions, that you're required to produce a valid driver's license when you're stopped. Your signature on a citation is not an admission of guilt. That's a very common thing that an officer runs into, is folks not understanding that, even though we explain it, and then there's reluctance, and so that's something that's good to have on here. And then a hyperlink to ACLU and Know Your Rights for more information. So that's the one side. On the other side, you know, again, more information about reasons for the police to stop people. If you're stopped in a vehicle, kind of safety messages that are given and what you should do. And then if you're stopped on foot, and some of the questions, and then some contact information. So I have it. I think it's a pretty good document, but I don't know if anybody went over it more closely and had any changes they wanted to make.
Did anyone on the commission have anything they wanted to ask and or give suggestions or anything about this? Anna, I know that you worked with Chief Jones and Amy on this.
would love to invite another commission member to go before me, since I did provide a lot of feedback. I do have some comments though,
Okay.
so I'll allow others to jump in first if that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll share some thoughts. Thank you for everyone for your hard work on this. And I think this was always, even at this stage, supposed to be sort of a work in progress. And so part of what we're doing here is giving additional feedback. And for those of you who are following, it's meant to be a trifold document. So the way it's reading on the screen doesn't really seem like it makes good sequential sense, but it's because it's a double-sided trifold document. So just keep that in mind. And, you know, as I looked over this again, because I gave Hannah some minimal feedback before, but I think a lot of what we're seeing here is also intersecting with what Black Lives Matter Oxford is asking of us. So I think there are some changes that we can make that would fit with those policy recommendations. So on the inside of the trifold, as I'm holding it up here, where it says contact us, there's nowhere for them to contact the PCRRC. It's all non-emergency police, emergency police, some administrative information, and then all OPD information. So we need to put something in there that allows the person who's receiving this pamphlet to contact the PCRRC directly. And as we get a system up for some anonymous data reporting, I think putting that in there as well would be really helpful. And then on the inside sort of third of the pamphlet, let's see. Okay, so it's right under like when you were stopped, you may be asked. So you guys are looking at this right now. Those of you who are following at home, what's your name? Do you have identification? And then underneath it says, these are simple questions with simple answers. But as I looked at this again, I realized they're not simple questions with simple answers for everybody, right? I mean, if someone's houseless, if somebody is living in multiple places, if they're living out of their car, it's not necessarily as clear cut as, you know, I live at 1211 Dana Drive. And so I think understanding that from the perspective of the police officer, recognizing that what might seem like evasive is actually because this person has a complicated home situation, can't necessarily answer that question quickly. So I would suggest we take that out. I think it seems a little bit defensive or accusatory in some way. I don't think it needs to be in there with that wording. And then, you know, we can talk more about wordsmithing. You know, the best thing for you is to stay calm. You know, there might be some other ways to refer to that, but certainly I can understand some people being anxious. And what does stay calm look like to the officer versus what it feels like to the person who's being stopped? And I think what we're seeing here too is some natural tension that occurs when we're sort of doing this. We're calling it a Know Your Rights and Responsibilities pamphlet, but like one of the rights that I know we have is to film officers doing their official duties in public. And there's nothing here about the right to record. And so, you know, again, these are the tensions that I think we should talk about. And then on the back, it says, what if you believe the officer acted inappropriately or violated your constitutional rights? And I think this is where it intersects well with what the Black Lives Matter Oxford is asking of us. The second bullet point says all uniformed officers wear a nameplate. Remember the name and write it down. But if we advance the policy that officers should be giving their business card with every stop, then it takes the onus off of the person who's been stopped, who might be nervous and uncomfortable to begin with, to remember all of these details, right? And then even asking the officer for a business card, you know, takes a certain amount of privilege and advocacy. And so if it's built into our system that our officers give the business card, it takes away, you know, you might still have something like that in there, but then it's also part of our practice to provide that. So those are a few things that have come to mind. I'm certainly happy to help with wordsmithing. I know it's a lot of work, and I appreciate the work that's been put into it so far. So that's the information that I have so far.
Thank you, Amber. Anyone else? Then Hannah, you had something.
So just to kind of piggyback, I know one of the initial suggestions I had made was a QR code. If we're handing out a printed document, the citizens might not be able to click on the hyperlinks. So maybe there's a QR code that can take individuals to like a centralized place where they can get all of this information, not just about OPD, but also PCRRC. I don't know how to do that, but that's still a suggestion I'd like to have on the record. On this, where it says contact us, just to affirm what Dr. Franklin suggested, I do think that we need to have information so that citizens can contact us, and then also the option to direct people where they can go to make an anonymous complaint. So making it specific, here's where you go to make an anonymous complaint, since that is something that we are working on. I think in the section, if you are stopped in a vehicle, actually throughout the document, just a little bit of the wordsmithing Dr. Franklin mentioned was being consistent with perhaps using the affirmative rather than saying, don't do this. Perhaps we could word it as you should do this. So using the second bullet point that says, do not make sudden moves, you could probably word it like make slow movements, because it just, the languaging makes it seem less punitive, and it also gives people options rather than restrict them. Let's see, what about if where it says you must produce a valid driver's license and proof of car or vehicle insurance, maybe in parentheses you could put when asked. Let's see. Is it okay if I only have a few more suggestions. I just don't want to take up time. If you disagree with the officer, you may go to the court and appeal, and perhaps just maybe like one phrase which describes what appeal means for for individuals whose first language is not English. They might not know what the word appeal means. And then where it says do not pull away in your car, rewording that to perhaps say stay in your car or stay on the side of the road, switching that to the affirmative. And then I don't know what Ohio's legal implications are, but I heard somewhere that for law enforcement to search a trunk, they have to have a warrant. Chief Jones, you might clarify that, but I thought that might be something else to include in there, is that citizens have the right to notify law enforcement, hey, you're not supposed to do that. Like, I have the right for you to not search my trunk. I don't know if that's important. Where it says, we're in the section, when stopped, you may be asked the following questions. In addition to where do you live, you could also word what is your address, not only for individuals who do not have a place where they live, or they might not have an address. Also thinking about, like, it's that question of, like, for me as a military kid, when someone asks me, where are you from? I can't answer that in like a cookie cutter way, right? So using other questions like, where do you live? Where are you staying currently? Do you have a physical address? Or could you tell me where it's located, like on what corner of where is it next to, or those kinds of things. And then also agreeing, maybe rewording the sentence that says, these are simple questions with simple answers, rewording it to answer to the best of your ability, or finding another way to reword that question or that sentence, and then the next one. Let's see. I think the last two things in the section where it's, what if you believe the officer acted inappropriately or violated your constitutional rights? What are the, I guess, how is a citizen going to know if an officer is, when they're non-uniformed, how are they going to know that that's an officer? Is that like, can we tell citizens you can expect a non-uniformed officer to identify themselves in this particular way? And then rewording the part about the business card, where rather than asking civilians or citizens to ask the officer to provide a business card, you can say, word it as, you can expect the officer to provide a business card. That way it places the expectation, and as Black Lives Matter Oxford has suggested, that this will be a norm, so that citizens can expect that. I think those are my initial comments and feedback. Thank you for allowing me to share.
Does anybody else have anything to add? I like the idea of the QR code with people's cell phones, could take a picture and get it on there and then look at the hyperlinks. That would be very helpful to people. I wrote a lot of notes about the suggestions people gave, and unless someone else wrote a lot of notes too, I will volunteer to maybe summarize them and send them off to the chief and talk about which of these are practical and which are not, and ways we can improve this document, and then hopefully bring it back to our next meeting and possibly get approval to go ahead and print, and then talk about how to distribute it to students who aren't here anymore and other townspeople. But I do know this, Amy Gabbard worked very hard on this, and wordsmithing is, and maybe someone would be better than me, because wordsmithing is not something I've done in my career. I'm pretty blunt and straightforward, gets you in trouble sometimes, but I think there are some of the suggestions we can take a look at, and then some I think we might not get worked in there. So yeah. Chief, do you want to add anything in?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Yeah, I mean, we don't have to necessarily go through them all tonight, but I mean, I think just keep in mind the idea of this pamphlet's not to give legal advice to anyone.
Yes.
It's also not to cover every situation. It's really geared to give safety things. So, I understand using the affirmative instead of the negative, but also, I mean, I think some people will listen to, stay calm and don't make sudden movements. So we can wordsmith those, but I mean, I just think we're getting into the weeds a lot with this, but the QR code is a great idea. I just couldn't seem to get it on there in time or figure it out. So, but we'll work on that. I think the business card, I understand, and we're going to talk more about that. But even if we make that a part of our policy where an officer gives a business card, I still think it's okay to keep it in the pamphlet that they should ask, because what if the officer doesn't? I mean, or what if it's a Miami University officer? What if it's a township officer? I mean, so I understand some of these things, and I think we can go into more detail, but, and like, Hannah, do you have a better word than appeal? I don't know what you're looking for there.
Just like another, like less legal term, because I don't know what goes into appealing, right? You can
Right.
like file paperwork to say like, you know, this didn't, I disagree with this.
Right, I understand. Again, I'll just say, like, I mean, somebody shouldn't be using this pamphlet to understand legal situations. It's a safety pamphlet, but I will work on some of that and come back the next meeting with it.
You know, I have a couple of suggestions. One of them is I think Chief Jones made a good point that this is not for legal advice and does not cover all the situations. Therefore, we need to put a note there somewhere to indicating that this is not a legal advice. This is just some common sense and to keep you safe and advice. And it doesn't cover all the situation, and it's just our suggestion. And so that will take us out from potential lawsuit or legal responsibilities. And I think that's one thing. Another thing, Hannah mentioned some word that may not be understood by international student. If, you know, if it's cannot be understood by people with lower education or then we have to put the words in a more like the layaway, more understandable. But in terms of international students or people do not speak the same language, I really think that we probably should have this pamphlet after it's completely updated, finalized, and translated into other languages as well. We have all different kind of student organizations. So, you know, we can utilize them, have them do the translation and also indicating they translated it and to the best of their ability, and then indicating the original English version take the precedent. And then this way, if they translated anything wrong, it's not our problem. And if we can help verify or proofread, that'll be great. But we may not necessarily have the ability to proofread all of them. But you know, this way, well, we can engage student organizations on one side and also help them doing the translation, and they will help us distribute and reach out more people that way, and also build a good relationship between those student organizations and our commission. I think that's is something that has many benefits.
I think that's an excellent idea. I think that's a really excellent idea. Thank you very much for bringing that up. We might have overlooked it had you not said something. So
May I also ask one thing? I'm so sorry. Can we change how we're calling this document? I know initially it had started out that we were wanting to consider doing a document that was celebrating knowing your rights and outlining all of those specific things. So can we call this document what to do when stopped or questioned by the police? Because I think they're two different things. Yeah.
So you want to call it what? I lost you there, sorry.
Oh, just the title of the pamphlet, because it's not exactly spelling out every single citizen's rights.
Okay.
Well, I wonder if looking at what I assume would be the front of it that has the shield, and taking what Hannah said, maybe we could say your rights and responsibilities when stopped or questioned by the police. Maybe that would be a way to do it. And I also think, I think all your individual suggestions are good. So this isn't a comment on that. But I think what I see as the underlying issue for virtually all of them has to do with trying to build trust, trying to communicate trust. And I wonder if maybe if we were to combine those things in terms of a title and create a little more space on that front page, if there couldn't be just a very, very short statement of goals, something like our goals to promote public safety, and ensure respect for all citizens. Something that, again, I don't know that any words are, just write a sentence and now you build trust. I think that's obviously simplistic. I do think that if that gives an indication of where is this coming from, what is intended by this document, that it represents what we're trying to do. And then maybe the wordsmithing's great, but all of that might flow better.
Yeah, and just to give a little sort of the background context from my comment about the recording, for those who are on the call with us, when we first started having this conversation, I think it was back in February, it was a while ago now, so much has happened since then. We had the conversation, and then Chief Jones, you shared with us a document from a police agency. It wasn't something that you had written, but it was about best practices, and it was from a law enforcement perspective. And one of the comments that I recognized right away was just not going to work, was actually the words, "Do not record us," right? "Do not film us." And so there's a real split, right, between what that document had said in terms of their preference for encounters with the public. And then as a Black woman, understanding that most of what I'm seeing that demonstrates abuse or misconduct happens because someone recorded, right? And so certainly if I'm gonna have to dig through my bag to get something to record, and I'm not gonna do that, after I've been stopped, that wouldn't be safe for me. And it would make the officer feel uncomfortable and not know maybe what I was doing. And so that's why I brought that up. It's just so the public knows that there is sometimes this tension that happens between best practice from the perspective of law enforcement and then the public sense of what allows us to feel safe and have justice if something goes wrong.
Anybody else? Okay, my hope would be that our next meeting, which is scheduled for November right now, that we could have something ready, but maybe not. I think we got to make sure that there's contact information for the PCRRC. Some of that might depend on if we redo how complaints are put in. And so, that's, if we have anonymous complaints on the website, we may want to put that in, and we may not have that item done yet. We may not be ready to do anonymous complaints on the website if we go that direction. But we'll attempt to move that forward, and I'll write some things up and then send it to Chief Jones and see where we can move with that. And if anybody else wants to send me information, that you think of later, please do that. Okay. The next item on the agenda is the information that the Black Lives Matter of Oxford group brought to City Council a few weeks ago. They read a letter that had 3 kind of requests of things they would like to see in policing in Oxford. And I will say this, since that letter went out, and maybe right before that, I know I met with Chief Jones uptown at a park bench and had some discussions about policing. And after the letter came out, I met with 2 different organizers of the Black Lives Matter movement. Then I met with Debbie Anderson, who organized a petition in support of the police. And what I'll say when we start this discussion is I found from both the chief and this woman who organized a petition in support of the police and the Black Lives Matter people, it seemed to me everyone's goals for Oxford are pretty much the same. What people want is a safe community, a community where they feel safe, in a community where people are treated fairly and justly. And I think the police department wants the same thing. So I think it's important for us to realize we're all working, I think, toward the same goal. Because of our perspectives, we may come from it from different angles and emphasizing different parts of that safety issue. Safety as a business owner or property owner, or safety as a young person who's out at 1 in the morning because that's what I do as a young person and I want to feel safe. So if we go through these, I think maybe we should just do them one at a time. I'll kind of summarize what it said. And then we'll let Chief Jones, can you respond to each one individually?
Yeah, I can do that. I'll need to share my screen when we
Right.
start. Okay.
All right,
Thank you.
yeah, Jessica knows how to do that. I don't. And then after he shares kind of some things that I think the city's already worked on, or maybe things in the past they've done that this group did not know about. Then we'll have the commission speak, and we can do one of two things tonight. We can make a motion and take a vote and recommend that the city council and the police look to take certain actions on this number one and this number two and number three. Or we can say, we need to research it further. We need to look into it further, and we can take action in the future and make a recommendation. I think our job tonight is to listen to this and either make a recommendation tonight or make a recommendation in the near future about whether what we think the city and the police department ought to do in response to this. Okay? Getting a lot of head nods, or we're knocking off. Okay, so the first one is requiring comprehensive reporting. And the Black Lives Matters wants to require police officers to establish, record, and report objective justification for all stops, including pedestrian stops. These reports should include the reason for the stop, location, demographic information, person stop, should specify use of force, if any, and the PCRRC should be granted access to this data and should provide anonymous aggregated information as well as conclusions to the public on a quarterly basis. And then they give rationale, which I think most of you have read, hopefully, the document. So basically, some of this is things we have asked for in the past, stop data on pedestrians. And some of it's, I think, things we're getting, information. We get a data report. I would encourage people in the public to look on the website under the commissions, boards and commissions, go to our police commission, and the data is from the last 3 years is there. And basically we get that data report yearly, not quarterly, because of the time involved in putting the data together. But I'll let the chief respond, and then we can have a discussion about that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mead. Let me get my screen up here. All right, so yeah, Mr. Mead outlined that first bullet point, the require comprehensive reporting. And, so you've all probably read that and the justification for it. I just want to say, this is a work in progress. It's something we have been working on. We're currently collecting traffic stop data and traffic crash demographic data. And we did that to just starting in January to meet those Ohio Collaborative standards. And, the collaborative is helpful because they tell you what they need. There's just many factors and details to work through in regards to pedestrian stops. And so we have this experience now of collecting 7 months of traffic stop data. Well, I guess 8 months now, that will help us to develop that. But, questions like, I just don't think it's as simple as people understand. When we talk about a pedestrian stop, are we talking about just jaywalkers? Are we talking about an alcohol violation? Are we talking about warrant stops or all of those things? Some of them are officer initiated. Some of them are responding to calls like suspicious persons. And so we just need to figure that out. It takes a lot of human capital, despite what the Black Lives Matter statement says. It's just not just in under a minute to get this done. Basically, what we have officers doing is filling out a form on every traffic stop contact. It's a checkbox. We're doing it on paper. The software does not support the reporting for this. this was a concern and part of my resistance to do all this, because now we're doing it all on paper. And then they submit those sheets, and our dispatcher clerks, they enter that data in Excel spreadsheet. And then we periodically are auditing that data. So what they're cross-referencing the data in that spreadsheet to data in the calls for service with our dispatch logs. And so they'll find at times where data is not submitted. So they try to determine what data that is. They send it to the officer. The officer then has to go through body cam footage to find out what, I forgot to turn that in, or for one reason or the other, it's not there. So they have to go collect that data. And then us administrators have to analyze that data. And quite honestly, just simply preparing for these meetings takes me an awful long time. So it's not without cost. Yes, I understand there's benefits to it. I would love to have it, and I'd love it to be easy. But that's something we're going to keep working on. Like I said, we're collecting the traffic stop data now, but we'll keep plugging away at that and hopefully start to be able to do something by January 1. It may be useful to have a commission member sit on a committee with us, because a lot of this work that you all want is falling upon the police, and we're short-staffed. We're down 2 officers. COVID prevented us from hiring those positions. Another officer tore his ACL in a foot chase, and we were without him for months now. And at the same time, which will come up later, is we're talking about some serious revenue shortfalls for the city. So we got to prioritize what we need and what we do. And as Mr. Mead mentioned earlier, in talking about sex versus gender, I think it's important that officers are trained well. It's important that officers engage in procedural justice. All of this stuff is captured on body cam, and so we work hard to maintain it. I'm not a statistician, but maybe we need to get one on staff. So we are working on it. And that's all I'll say on that one.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. So if the commission members want to respond, ask questions, give opinions or anything about this first item, I know that we have, it's kind of been really the focus of the commission, besides learning about policing and learning about your training and maybe offering a little suggestions. I think it is the area, and it's probably been the area where there's been the most tension between the commission and the police, is our desire to get more data and the police department's response, which probably has many logical reasons. But does anybody have anything they want to add, ask questions? Go ahead, Egon, you're muted. You need to unmute yourself, Egon.
Oh.
Okay. You're
Okay.
good.
I just want to say, that I have been working with data for about 20 years in a professional capacity in a number of different environments. And I mean, what Chief Jones just said makes perfect sense. Collecting the data is really not as easy as, just filling out a survey. Especially for professions where that are documentation heavy. I have personally been placed in a hit list for social workers for adding 10 questions to a satisfaction survey. So it is something that happens. It's the documentation that in my case, for adding 10 questions to a satisfaction survey. I did not take into consideration that they have 2 hours of documentation that they have to do on every single client that they see. So adding, just those additional 10, 15 minutes for a satisfaction survey, that is really not you know, it's not just that simple. So I just want to thank Chief Jones for fulfilling all the requests that we have made of him, for giving us that data, and for accommodating those requests. So yeah, and I just want to say, I mean, it is not that simple. It just doesn't add, just a couple minutes, but it is pretty heavy. It is important. I do recognize that. So, again, I just want to say thank you, Chief Jones, for doing that.
Well, thank you, Mr. Cron. One just like an anecdotal story today. Let me just give you an example. Today, me driving around in a marked police car. I pull up, I see a car parked in a yellow zone that's just stopped in traffic. I pull up next to the car, side by side, ask the woman if she's okay. And she said she's just waiting on one of her college friends to come out. And does she need to move? I said, well, if she comes out right now, it's fine. But yeah, you're in a yellow zone. And I drive away. Is that a traffic stop? I didn't turn my lights on. It's consensual contact. Is it a field contact? Okay, then earlier, well, this was the other day, I'm stopping a group of 4 college students that appear to have beer in their hand. Okay, I walk up to them, 2 of them, the containers are closed, one of them has it open. I stop her, I ask for her identification, because she's actually violating the law, but I had walked up to the whole group. Do I document that as a pedestrian stop? Or is it a liquor violation? I'll just to share, to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. Let me show you one real quick screen. If I can find it. Where is it at? Oh, I gotta move. Okay, so this is a screen that shows for in 2020, up to this point, what all our call types are. And here you see them. This is the dispatch log and how dispatchers enter calls. So if I'm a police officer, when I jump out of my car because someone is carrying an open container of alcohol, I may say over the radio, I'm out with a liquor violation. Okay. And that's how the dispatcher enters it. Or, as I often do, because I say, I'm out with a pedestrian stop because they're walking. Some officers in dispatch, and it also depends on the dispatcher, says, I'm on an FI stop, a field interview. Okay, that's usually like a suspicious person. So there's all these different, and you can see the data numbers for just 2020. So those are, I mean, those are not things for you to sort through, but those are internal policy decisions we have to make, like we did with traffic stops. We had to talk about, what if it's a reckless operator call that's not dispatcher or that's not officer initiated? Do we want you to record that? And in order to be consistent, we said no, only officer initiated traffic stops, because we're looking to make sure officers don't have bias, right? And then we're also recording traffic crash data because we're trying to determine who our drivers are on the road and not just rely on census data. So anyway, my point is it is complicated. As I've said from the beginning, I would love to have that information to share, because I think it would be in our favor to show what we're doing, or to be able to see a problem if there's one, but it's just complicated. So we'll keep working hard and trying to get to it. But I just want you to know that we are working on it.
Yeah, thank you, Chief Jones, for sharing that. It's illuminating when you see numbers in a chart like that. A few thoughts that I have about this. One is, The Ohio Collaborative Standard on Bias-Free Policing, it's a standard that is designed to reduce bias in officer-initiated traffic stop, field stops, as well as, I think it's civil asset forfeiture searches. But the only type of data that was mandated by the Ohio Collaborative was the officer-initiated traffic stop data. And when they released that standard on February 17th in 2017, they gave larger departments, I think, had to meet that standard sooner, but smaller departments, because there was an awareness of the resource limitations, I suspect, were given till 2020. And so we did receive the officer-initiated traffic stop from OPD by the deadline set out by the Ohio Collaborative. And so we appreciated that. I think the amount of time that the Ohio Collaborative gave is an indication of a recognition that this does not happen overnight. You know, it's not quick and it's not easy. And so seeing that chart is helpful for me. I think what I want to get back to, though, is a concern that was raised by the community before I probably even moved to Oxford. Some of the conversations that led into the formation of the police commission, which is concerns, I think, often of young Black men who felt that they were stopped and asked questions and it was not clear why, and you know, experiences that a lot of our white college students don't have on this campus. And so I think the question, so we do get this information annually. I think it is too much to ask that it gets rolled out quarterly, because it is a big lift, I think, to present, to compile those data. But I think it would be worth having a conversation now or at some other time. How can we get at the concern that was part of the original need for the police commission? And maybe that comes from very clear and easy ways for people to file concerns or complaints in terms of their interactions with officers. And I want to recommend a website that some people on the call from the community might already know about. It's rahim.org. And rahim.org is sort of a grassroots effort to collect data on encounters with police officers. And what I appreciate about what rahim.org has put out is it allows for anonymous reporting of officer interactions nationally, but it allows you to say things like, so these are the categories when you go to the website. You can say, I was helped by an officer, I was protected by an officer, but it also allows you to click, I was profiled by an officer, neglected, harassed, wrongly accused, disrespected, physically attacked, bullied, detained, a witness to misconduct. So it shows all the different levels of concern, as well as opportunities for positive interactions to be reported between community members and police officers. And so with an understanding that the recording and all the complexities of recording field stops and putting that together with the fact that the Ohio Collaborative did not mandate that data to be collected, I think going back to the ways that we can create a really transparent complaint system and then widely broadcast it often, because we have this rolling population with students. So there's knowledge that leaves when students graduate. So it's going to be on the city and the commission to constantly, and with the help of Black Lives Matter Oxford and other student organizations, to constantly keep not just the university, but the Oxford community aware of the opportunities to file these concerns, and that data come to us, and that's going to be related to some of the other policies that come forward, so that we can keep track of that and also make recommendations to OPD.
Dr. Franklin, how do you spell that website?
RAHEEM, rahim.org.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any comments on this first suggestion? And I think much of it we do, except the pedestrian stops and possibly some reasons for that. But go ahead, Egon.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to, make a suggestion. We are, Chief Jones already provides us with an annual report. You know, I think, I don't know if it's possible to work perhaps with one of the university's systems analysis department to automate that report so that it can be generated rather quickly on a quarterly basis. I think that's, you know, just automating it and streamlining the data entry and acquisition, you know, could go a long way to making those reports faster to generate. You know, the data collection is always going to be an issue, but you know, the acquisition and reporting should be able to be streamlined a little bit better. That was just a suggestion.
Yeah, I do think there are resources available to help us solve problems here. And I think, you know, one of the things the commission wants to do is make all citizens feel like they're treated fairly and equally and justly. And there is a perception, rightly or wrongly, by people that that doesn't always happen. And that's one of the things we've worked on, which is why we like to get the data, because my belief is the data will usually show, just like body cameras usually show, the great majority of times, that the right thing is being done. And that transparency will increase the trust with the community, where they'll say, well, yeah, I heard so-and-so say he got stopped and there was really no reason, but I know the police department's keeping data and it doesn't show that's an overwhelming problem. Maybe there was a reason. And I'm obviously, Chief Jones, I've been on one ride along, and it's the only time in my life, I swear, I've been in a police car. And when you have an officer, if they pull over to stop somebody, you know, because it's 2 a.m. and they're in an alley and they say, hey, what are you up to? Who are you? Do they have to call in and say, you know, pedestrian stop or field interview to them, so that dispatchers know where they are kind of and what's going on?
Yes, I mean, they should be calling that out, that they're stopping someone. I mean, sometimes things happen quickly and maybe they haven't had a chance to radio it and they start talking to them. And then once they get out of the car, they call it out. But so not every contact do you call out, but safety wise, it makes sense that, you know, I'm going to attempt to stop this person.
Right.
So each officer does it a little bit differently, but yeah, you normally, if you've stopped someone, you're calling that out on the radio.
And that, will they say things like it's an alcohol stop, alcohol violation stop? It's a.
Yeah, so that's, again, that's getting into those things that I described. Like the other day, I called it a pedestrian stop when I got out because I wasn't quite sure if alcohol was open. Some officers would see it and just call it, I'm out on a liquor violation. But basically, you just want to get to the dispatcher that I'm getting out with someone. This is my location. So, and then
so they know. Yeah. And so, and then the dispatcher's checking off the box of where it goes pretty much right then.
Yeah.
You know, okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not an IT person or a policeman, so I'm talking out of 2 fields that I know very little about. So it seems to me if I was getting out of a car, I could say, you know, alcohol violation, 3 white females in their 20s. And the person could, as a checkoff box, fill in the next street. And I don't know how that would work, but maybe I'm totally out of left field. Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, first of all, the sheer number of categories is just staggering there. So, I mean, I do appreciate very much wrestling with categorization and all that. But what I think I'm hearing is that the issue isn't so much out of X number, large number of categories, which one it gets placed into, but the perception of the person who's stopped, whether it's in a vehicle or as a pedestrian stop, that there's legitimacy to the stop, that the officer had a legitimate reason for detaining the person to look into something. And it seems like that's the perception that needs to be addressed. I don't think probably people who are stopped, if they feel they weren't doing anything or that they were targeted, is going to be related to which of what almost look like hundreds of categories. I mean, again, I'm just staggering number of categories there, but has to do with legitimacy and that to me, that would be the deeper issue. I'm not proposing a solution, but I see that as more of the issue, or at least that's how it sounds to me, that needs to be addressed, that people are being treated fairly, that regardless of sex, race, or ethnicity, or anything else, that there's a legitimate reason to be stopped, and that it's in the interest of public safety for all involved for the stop to occur. And that addressing that perception is going to go, in my opinion, a long way toward making the community feel safe and have trust, going back to that from earlier. It's just, I don't know what I would do as an officer. I think it would be analysis paralysis to have to look at hundreds of categories and figure out what to put it into. But I think that's kind of missing the point that it sounds to me is the underlying issue.
Yeah, I think I agree with that, Mr. Nadler, and that's what we've talked about before. Is like, the training for the officer needs to be, how do we treat someone? How do we be procedurally just? Looking at the bias-free policing policy, I agree the data would be great to have, but for instance, I hear these things come up in city council meetings or at these meetings that a person of color was unloading groceries and an officer drove by and said something, and that was perceived as an improper stop. Well, that description, that story I gave you a little bit ago about pulling up next to someone in their car, that's exactly what I did. And that was a Black female student. And, I do my best to try to explain why I stopped, but I certainly understand that may be her perception that I pulled up and stopped because of her race. And that wasn't the case at all. But, I think the data would help. And I think we'll put together a committee and we can come up with a way to try to collect some of the data. And maybe we can collect it all. Maybe there's people out there a lot smarter than me that can help us do that. So I think we can keep working on it, but if we're able to move on to the other things, I think I have some stuff to share on those that will address some of what Ms. Franklin was talking about.
Yeah. I think the issue is, there's a perception, and what we want to do is increase trust, and the data will help.
Yeah.
Maybe show if that perception is correct or incorrect. I think what we have to say is that it can be done. I can't believe in America in this century with technology that it can't be done. It can be done. We just haven't nailed down the way to do it efficiently so that police officers are doing their main job, which is not paperwork. But I think it can be done. Now, if the commission, I don't know what the feeling of commission is, we can sit on this, we can make some formal motion that we want the police department to, within 6 months, get back to us with information on progress they made on this. We can give advice that way, but I think we ought to do it by making a motion, seconding it and voting it. So it's sort of the wish of the committee to say, here's where we think we ought to go. Here's the advice we're giving. Here's a timeline, and not to expect everything done, but maybe just to get some movement. And we're willing to help do that as commission members, or some of us might have connections at Miami or other places with people in IT or such that might understand this better than the commission members do, and might be able to help the police department. Don't these students need class projects to develop things? And can't we tap into some of that? So I don't know if any commission member think what the feeling is we ought to take action we ought to take with this step before we move to the next one. Any ideas?
I would agree with further exploring this, but I have two quick questions. Chief Jones, the document that you shared with us with that list of how the calls are categorized, could that be something that you provide as a part of the yearly reporting as a start? And then the second thing would be, well, now that I know that you're working from Excel documents that have like officer badge number and then like the reason for why they were enlisted, it shouldn't be too difficult to input in Excel officer race, age, and sex. And I am willing to dedicate and volunteer my time to do that. Because all you have to do is next to the badge number is input 3 new columns and just input officer age, race, and sex, and like scroll down and copy. So then you can actually make your reports and cross all of those different variables. So those were the 2 things that I had to add.
Yeah, that document I showed earlier, yeah, that's, I mean, that's public information that if the commission wants it, they certainly can have it. So yeah.
So I think we should move, first of all, that we get that dispatch information as part of our annual report. And perhaps that's something that we can get quarterly, since it's sort of already seems like it's logged pretty easily. And then a recommendation or a motion that we revisit this, we continue this discussion at our next meeting, and that, what was it, Pat, that you said that OPD and City Council can continue to have a conversation about it and give us updates?
Well, you know, I think if you look at this suggestion, and I think it's something that people on the commission have also asked for, but there's difficulty with accomplishing it, which the 2 things in the suggestion we don't do is pedestrian stops and then the initial reason for the stop. That spreadsheet Chief Jones showed us shows that they obviously check a box for the initial reason for the stop. And so my suggestion would be that we make a motion that we ask the police department and the city to work on establishing a way to collect pedestrian stops and the reasons and report back to the commission in 6 months. And then, so we aren't demanding anything be done, because we don't know if that can be accomplished within the constraints the city is under budget wise, the constraints of the police department being short, but we can ask that a good faith effort be made, and that we get a report back on what efforts have been made. That would be my suggestion. I don't know what other people think.
Did you just make the motion, Pat? Can I second it?
Well, we can do that. Does anybody else have anything to add? Because I will make the motion then.
I think it keeps the ball rolling, moving forward.
Right.
Yeah.
And I do want to, I think Chief Jones, we're going to take action on this. We're going to look into it. By putting it in a motion and in a vote, we formalize it to say to the city, to the OPD, to ourselves, and to citizens that we are formalizing steps forward to deal with this issue of pedestrian stops and reasons. And I think if we're trying to build trust, we got to let people know we aren't just talking, that we're taking some actions and putting a date for, report back. It's not perfection. We aren't going to start it tomorrow. I think that's impossible. So if anybody wants to word a motion, otherwise I will, if you want. Okay. I'd like to move that the commission ask the OPD to develop a plan for collecting data on pedestrian stops and the reasons for those pedestrian stops, and report back to the commission in 6 months on the progress on that. Can I get a second for that?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, Jessica, would you call the roll? You're still here?
Miss Story,
Here.
Mr. Cron,
You were muted, I think.
Yes.
okay. Mr. Nadler,
Yes.
Mr. Wang,
Yes.
Miss Franklin,
Yes.
Mr. Mead.
Yes, and Mr. Long? Did you forget Mr.
Oh,
Long?
Mr. Long, sorry, she's not. Mr. Long,
Aye.
thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to go to the second, but I will say this up front, we will not get to the third tonight. I will not press on people's time and go that late. I think the third is a bigger discussion that might involve way more people than just the commission, since it's a total it's looking at prioritizing city goals and priorities. But I think we can deal with the next one in the next 20 minutes or so, and that is removing barriers to reporting police misconduct. Do you have that on your slideshow, Chief? Because you could put that up and I'll read it. And then I'll let you respond first.
Okay. Well,
Down a few slides.
yeah.
Oh, is it not working? There we
No,
go.
there you go.
Okay. And this was barriers to reporting police misconduct, which we've talked about before, our complaint process. For all stops, require police officers to give civilians their name, badge number, reasons for the stop, and a card with instructions for filing a complaint with the Police Community Relations and Review Commission. So I'll let you respond first, Chief Jones.
Sure. Well, this is something, as you said, we've talked about before as far as removing barriers, and that's come up in meetings about the barriers to reporting police misconduct. And as I've shared on Facebook in the past through the OPPD Facebook page, as I've said at these meetings, I want people, my door's open, people come talk to me. We'll look into what we can. If we need to guide someone through a formal complaint, we will do that. And the commission can do that. So we want that, but we also want due process for our officers, right? So, so in response to that, what I'll just say, and I don't know, it's hard to read with this screen on my screen. Basically, we already have in our general orders, General Order 26.1, Appendix A, Code of Conduct, Rule 9 reads, while on duty, members shall carry their badge and identification card on their persons, and except when impractical or dangerous to the safety or investigation, they shall furnish their name and badge number and or ID number to any person requesting that information when they're on duty or while holding themselves out as having official capacity. So we do have rules in our conduct that you have to identify yourself. And that kind of goes back to that pamphlet where we all have nameplates. If you don't have a nameplate, and you want a business card, the officer, unless there's some strange circumstances, would have to provide that. These are our business cards. They look like this. This is Officer Campbell's business cards. We hand these out regularly. As you can see, it contains his contact information, and we've done this for years. And then on the back of these business cards, we have a spot for the officer to write in the call number, the report number. It has our police website here so they can get a copy of the report or they can learn other information. And then we have this down here that says, we welcome your comments regarding your experience with the Oxford Police. Please send letters to the Chief of Police at the address on the front or email to his attention. So I get those emails. I see those emails. Not everybody emails me, but I get positive comments. I sometimes get negative comments. And so, you don't have to have a notarized complaint to necessarily bring something to my attention. Ms. Green and I have been working on updating our website, at the suggestion of Ms. Franklin, to have, the PCRC members already have their email addresses on the website. Folks can sort them, find them, and email them directly. But we did create this contact form that we want to have you look at and tell us what you think of it. So this would be on the police department's webpage and on your the webpage that deals with the Police Community Relations Review Board.
John, it's not pulling up the web link. Can you slide your image over maybe?
Oh, do I need to close my PowerPoint maybe?
Maybe, try that.
Let me try that. Well, shoot. Let me
It doesn't
stop.
work.
Let me try it.
Quick.
Okay,
You keep looking and I'll look. Um,
but how about that? Is that up?
there you go. You got it. Yep.
So this would be on the website. This would be just a web form that someone could go fill out their comments to contact the Police Community Relations and Review Board. Just a free text field, date of incident, your name, your address, and your email address. Jessica would have to speak if those are required fields, but they're all free text, and then just this little, I'm not a robot. So this would email all the commission members and I believe copy me directly. So that's one way we can improve the ability of the public. But we have not made this live because we wanted your feedback. I'm going to keep moving on though, so I can show you the other part of this.
I was going to say, why don't you show the next one and then we can talk about the difference between the two and public records laws a little bit.
Okay.
Cool. Thanks.
All right. So I don't know if I have to do it this way, but. Okay. So this is live, our police website. This is actually not just the form, but this is where I want to, we do pay parking citations, file a crime report, schedule a ride along. And we were going to put that, the PCRC contact information there as well. But this is a new form that this is what Dr. Franklin's been talking about. Provide feedback about my experience with the OPD. So when you click on that, you go to a Google form, and this allows someone to simply submit feedback, and that'll come. We can have that directed to me. We can have it directed to the city manager. But these are things that just try to make it more accessible. Because like I said, I get plenty of feedback from the public in general. Despite what I know some people say they're reluctant to contact me, there are plenty of people who are not reluctant to contact me. So anyway, you would fill this information out. Great guys. Chief Jones, today, I don't know if I need to do this, but I mean, I'm getting tired, so. And then it takes here and it says the feedback can be anonymous, but if you'd like us to follow up with you, please provide your contact information. So we have name, phone number, and email, and then they submit that. So I think this kind of helps to reduce those barriers to police misconduct. We can talk, there's other things we can do, but I think this is a quick thing we can do, and it's kind of in line with the goals of the commission. And is that all, Jessica?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. And we did call our attorney about how do these forms work? Like, what are the rules around them? And the short answer is that everything we do is a part of public record. And so these forms and these emails that would come to you would be part of public record. Now, people would have to request it, but that's how that would work. We can't really escape that at all. But we can make them anonymous, right? And we can respond to them based on patterns we may see, or things like that. For the one, this one that would go directly to you as an email, we would almost make a auto comment back that says, thank you for your comment to the Police Community Review Board. They'll respond, they'll discuss this at their next meeting. So you really shouldn't communicate back to these individuals or talk to them outside of a public meeting, because that would kind of violate some of the sunshine laws. That is one of the restrictions we have. And so we're open to your feedback on wordsmithing or how we do it. And then I want to give just one more mention that we are probably going to be revising our website over the next 6 months. So what this looks like right now is a quick fix, and then what it may look like in the future may edit in the next 6 months, just a little bit. So I'll stop there and take any questions or thoughts you have And if you have real legal questions, we'll need to get our city attorney on to answer, but that was the summary version.
Thank you. Does anybody on the commission have any comments? I think the two things that Chief Jones and Jessica brought deal with giving feedback to the police department. And I don't know if you want to talk about those two things or other things that relate to this request for the business cards also was in there. That's right. You put the business cards in there. So does anybody in the commission have any comments or questions?
I do have a quick question about the volume of emails that you said you get regularly. How many would you say you get, like on a monthly basis, or?
Yeah, just I don't know on a monthly basis. I don't every day get an angry email from a citizen, but I also get a lot of positive emails. I'm gonna try one more time to share another slide. Let's see. I'm sorry, I'm not more proficient in this.
I was going to say, also that, a lot of those emails that you probably get, we probably all see them on Facebook as well.
Yeah, that was kind of one of the things I wanted to address. I'm just, I closed my PowerPoint, that's why. But yeah, so in my PowerPoint, I had some other ways that citizens share their feedback with me, and that is through social media, right? So the OPD Facebook page, we made a very concerted effort to broaden that, to expand our reach. And the whole purpose of police departments using social media is to create a two-way conversation. So we get the majority of our information comes through Facebook, through private messages, okay? And I'm sure some of you that are on social media saw this. A gentleman just the other day shared a private message complaining about one of our cruisers being in the new bike lanes. And we tried to answer him and explain that, well, we're also having problems with speeding. So I've got them parked there because that's the best place. And he didn't like that answer. We came back and forth. So he took to Oxford Talk and shared that on social media. And then people who have my cell phone number, people who know me, they go on Oxford Talk and comment negatively about the police. Okay, so that stuff stays out there, and we have officers, and this can go to the conversation about the notarized complaint. We have officers who have been just slandered on the internet for cop block sites and things like that, and that bothers them. They're called racist, they're called whatever, and there's nothing we can do about it. So from my perspective, I welcome people to bring the complaint forward to me, because we'll investigate it and we'll get to the bottom of it, and I'll prove that it's not true in most situations. But that the whole idea of notarizing your complaints is kind of the due process for the officer, because we're going to take action. If I arrest you for a crime, I have to notarize my complaint at the court. Okay, so that's part of the union's desire to have that due process. Them and I can disagree on some things with it, but I understand where they're coming from. That's something we can work on in contract negotiations, and labor management, and through those investigations. But yeah, so we want to, I think there's plenty of ways for people to give feedback. I know people aren't always comfortable coming to the police, but by putting the PCRC's information out there, by putting these feedback forms on the website, I think we're going towards that goal. And I think I'm still going to hear from some of you at times. You heard this story third hand about somebody who got stopped by the police, and the only reason that they know that they got stopped is because they're a person of color. And I'm not going to have any way to track that unless you give me some information. So that's kind of those are all my responses to the feedback stuff. But I think there's some rooms for improvement. We can give our business cards out more often. We can make it part of our routine to give them. I think most officers do give them, but if I'm giving someone a traffic ticket, I don't typically give it because I'm giving them the paper ticket with my name on it and badge number. So those are small details we can work through, but I just wanted you to at least know this is what we do currently. And these are some things we've done in response to Black Lives Matter and in response to the commission. So I'll yield my time now.
Thank you. Just a couple things. The notarization thing is in the contract. The contract was just ratified and voted on by City Council. That's not up for what, two or 3 years?
That's 3 years.
3 years. So in a sense, we can put that conversation aside to some degree, unless the union comes forward and says, we're willing to give that up to show the people of Oxford, we want to make it easy to get feedback. That would be awesome, but otherwise the city is stuck with that. Second, I think, Jessica, you said something about public records. And I think if people complain to us and we respond to them, that's not a violation of sunshine laws. But it can be requested. An open record request can be made. Any communication we have about the business of the commission, no matter what email any of us use, is open to a public record request. So, anything that I've written to commission members to get meetings set up, someone could request all that and see what it is we're writing. And if someone sends in one of those complaints, if we go forward with that and a commission member responds, those emails are public record. I think it's important for the 7 of us to know that, but also people who complain have to realize once you put something in writing, it is public record. Just a couple comments on the things the chief said. Those cards are very nice. Maybe you could add next time you print them, we don't want you to spend money, I don't as a taxpayer, add it below their email, the officer's email, the site where they click on it and get the complaint form to send to the commission. You just put up, we're going to try to have a commission complaint form. And so on every officer's card, that would be at the bottom. If you want to contact the police commission about your experience, here's how you do it. It's on all their cards. If you make that part of their regular routine to pass them out, they would have that. People would have it on the card as they got stopped. And otherwise, I don't know if anybody in the commission had comments on those forms.
Thank you so much for putting the time into putting that together. I know that for those who are listening, part of what I had shared with the commission and Chief Jones were some direct quotes from at Dear Miami U that involved policing, where people felt like they had been profiled, and as a demonstration of the kinds of concerns that come from members of the Black community. And so I understand that, there are a couple of ways, I think, when you're thinking about leadership, there's sort of disciplinary action because of violation of policy and procedure. And of course, there needs to be due process for that. But then there's also kind of setting tone in culture. And I know that's important to you, Chief Jones. And so my sense is that if there is a way for people to complain or to share their concerns anonymously, I understand that without a lot of detail, it can't result in any kind of disciplinary action per se, unless it allows you to look at perhaps a body cam, do a body cam audit and you see evidence of something perhaps, but it allows for a sense of, patterns or trends that I would hope, if you see it going against the culture that you're trying to establish within OPD, that you would be able to respond to in a meeting, sort of informally, not necessarily in a disciplinary action. And I see these cards as, you see all these trucks that have signs on the back, how am I driving, right? With a phone number where you can call and give positive or negative feedback. I support this recommendation, this policy from Black Lives Matter Oxford, and support what Mr. Mead just said about adding something that would link them to the police commission. Because again, and I understand there might be times when an officer might forget, or there might be a time when it's not necessarily safe. But even with a traffic stop, there's just something about having a small card in your hand as opposed to sort of a strip of paper that has a lot of dense information on it because it's related to a traffic ticket, that I think is just more recognizable and sort of easy, more accessible in many ways. But again, I think that it takes a certain amount of courage to say, I want your card, or even more politely, may I have your card? That I think a lot of people who are from marginalized groups don't necessarily have. You know, I mean, I'm a Black woman with a PhD, middle class, and you know, have police officers in my family, work on a police commission. I would not hesitate to ask for a card, but a lot of other people wouldn't. And so I think making that as part of the practice, that regardless, traffic stop or whatever, that you give that out, I think is great. And I thank Black Lives Matter Oxford for that recommendation. I appreciate that. And I thank you for setting up that complaint page.
Anybody else? And maybe what we can do with the complaint page is, I noticed today the one was on there, on the website, because I've said to people there's 12 things you can do when you go to the police website, and none of them is really give feedback about an incident. There was things about feedback about parking. And I went today and there was 13 things, and you've added that form for feedback. I didn't see the form on the PCRRC site yet, but I think we might want to give some feedback for that. So my suggestion to the commission is that somehow, Jessica, if you can send a picture of this form to us or what, and people can provide feedback. And I don't think we need any motion to go forward with putting it on the website. I think both of these things are positive steps in giving the community more access to providing positive and negative feedback. And I think those are good things. And I think if you're not opposed to adding on to the business cards, Chief, the PCRC complaint form when we get it done, that, you know, this form I'm looking at on my screen now, at the bottom, the URL, so somebody could take that card home, type in that URL, this would come up on their computer or cell phone or whatever, and they could fill it out. That would be a great addition to their business cards. And I don't know if we need a motion for you to start saying to your officers, let's start handing out those business cards so we can let the community know we're accessible. I mean, I don't know what other members of the commission feel, but go ahead, Chief.
No, I was just going to say, I'll come up with some language, because I mean, I think I understand what you're asking, but I don't want to say to complain on an officer, go here. I think
right, no
feedback, or to provide feedback to the police commission, you know, have a link there. But yeah, we'll work on that. And I don't think we need a motion to do that, but it'll take us some time. So maybe at the next meeting, we can share what we come up with.
Right.
And then Ms. DeLong wants to speak. So go ahead.
Oh,
you should be able to mute yourself, Ms. DeLong. Go ahead.
I just had a question. If we, and I echo the chief's comments that compliment question should all be accessible without an encouragement that contact with us has only to be negative.
Right.
With an anonymous complaint, though, doesn't that prohibit or at least hamstring the ability of the department to investigate the complaint? The Sixth Amendment, says, if one has the right to confront their accuser, at minimum, doesn't it stand to reason that in order to properly investigate a complaint, I have to know who's making that complaint?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, that would be my challenge. Like, I couldn't take a whole lot of action on an anonymous complaint. Especially if more information is needed. I think I mean, I don't know that we could even start an internal investigation In fact, we couldn't start an internal investigation based on the contract unless the complaint was such that I found other evidence that could be used to conduct an internal investigation, and I signed the complaint, for instance. So yeah, I think you have to tread very lightly with anonymous complaints. But that's why I believe that feedback form should come to me, and it's not going to be posted to a public domain immediately. So I can have a two-way conversation with a person. Because like I said, some people, they don't go to the website, they just go to the website, find my email address, email me about it. I can give examples of that where they weren't happy with the way the officer conducted the investigation. And so then I watch it, I'll figure it out. And it's not always something that rises to an internal investigation. It's just talking to his supervisor and saying, hey, why didn't we arrest this guy? Go review this case and see why we didn't satisfy this citizen. So
Yeah, I would say that like on your form at the police department, you're allowing them to submit them anonymously though. And I do think that's good. I'll get into that in a second. We don't want to go forever though. But I also think maybe somehow when they go to the PCRRC, there ought to be room for that to be anonymous. And I think the thing is there's a difference in power, in people's feeling of what power they have to register the complaint. And where anonymous complaints in an institution like a police department or a school, you're kind of stuck about action you can take. Sometimes a number of anonymous complaints can point out a pattern or a cultural problem or something that you might want to look into. And eventually someone may give a signed complaint and you may realize these anonymous complaints are similar. I mean, we see a lot of times that, people's fear of coming forth against somebody they consider more powerful or an institution they consider more powerful. And sometimes it takes 12 anonymous complaints, something comes public, and those people that have made the anonymous complaints then will stand up and say, well, that happened to me too. I do think it gives us information. We cannot go punish an officer because we don't have the right information, and that's not the point of them. I would think the point would be to see where the culture is, to see where patterns are. But I think this is something we can keep working on. I feel comfortable that the city, Jessica and Chief Jones are making progress in this area, and I feel comfortable we can keep moving forward and tweaking things. Yeah, go ahead, Egon. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna offer a suggestion on the email forms or on the web forms. If you could add just a drop-down list of the officers' names, as well as, it's like, how was your experience, and then a rating of 1 through 5, like kind of like an Amazon review, so I think that's something that would be very easy in order to report out, how those complaints or comments, feedback is coming in, whether it's positive, negative, and you can, just do a very simple, cross tabulation by officer and review rating. So.
Any other comments? Larry, go ahead.
Real quick, and I don't want to open up a can of worms here, but what I'm hearing is there's a big gap between the formal complaint process on the one hand, which does have due process rights for officers and knowing who's accused you and being able to investigate all the attendant problems with that. And what I see at the other end of the spectrum, which involves second or third hand stories that are told that probably are, without addressing the veracity, that it's an entity. It exists. And I wonder if somewhere in between, instead of a formal complaint, some type of way that somebody could express a concern, there would be more of an informal process. Maybe it could be routed through a commission member, and maybe it would entail the chief looking into it and providing feedback. And it might be enough to satisfy the person who didn't want to come forward and give his or her name, but that allows their concern to be addressed, protects who they are for various reasons. They might not want to identify themselves, but instead of it going unaddressed or simply being lore or a story that gets told and everybody, nobody knows what to do with it because it's not either a formal process, nor is it really anything that you can grab hold of, that may be middle ground where people with concerns, those concerns could get in front of the police, in front of the commission, and be dealt with more informally. And there could be a feedback loop completed back to the person that might be very satisfactory and might address their concern and might build trust ultimately, that if it's lacking, that we could do better.
I think if I could speak a little bit to that, maybe, if that's okay, Mr. Mead.
Yes.
I guess I would say I understand, and this may not touch on what you're saying exactly, Mr. Nadler, but I feel like that's the role of our sergeants, because when people come in the lobby, oftentimes that person just wants to be heard, right? They just want to say, this officer, I don't know why he's picking on me. I feel like he's following me all the time. Can you talk to him? I don't want him to know it came from me. And that does happen. Our sergeants, they're the first line when a citizen comes in to complain in the lobby. We let them speak to a supervisor. And the majority of time, it's maybe a misunderstanding of, no, the officer, just like Hannah mentioned something earlier about searching the trunk of a car, and that's not correct. They don't need a warrant to search a car. And so if the sergeant explains that, sometimes it's handled and there is no formal complaint. That happens. That is the majority of what we deal with, those type of informal things. And sometimes sometimes the officer was in the wrong and the supervisor then addresses it. Like they go watch the body cam and they say, you could have, you were, rude to this person. You could have said it this way. I understand you're having a rough day, but so it's discipline in the ongoing thing. And so there is a lot of that. And I think sometimes, I'm sorry if I'm pushing back a little bit on all of you, but we're getting into the weeds, and they pay me a lot of money to be a police chief in this town. And I appreciate all your input, but I've read books on police accountability, and this is what I do. And so, I mean, this is what I did for years as a sergeant, talk to citizens and make them understand. And if you give them the formal complaint and say, if you want to file a formal complaint and have it investigated, this is what we need to do to write some discipline. With body cams nowadays, it's a lot easier because now we can just watch it and then I can file the formal complaint. And supervisors do that. They file the formal complaint when they see something egregious. But generally, the kinds of complaints we're getting are they felt like the officer didn't show enough empathy, or they felt like the officer didn't give them enough time or was rude. And you go back and you watch it and you're like, yes, maybe that officer could have been more empathetic. Or you say, no, I think you're just, reading into that a little too much, and you'd have that conversation. So that's called supervision, failure to supervise if we don't do that. So I'm sorry if I'm, coming on wrong there, but that's, I mean, I think Mr. Mead in the education world, that's what a principal does, right? I mean, so anyway, but yeah, we'll keep, I think these feedback things we're working on are good and in the direction that you want us to go.
But yeah, I do. I don't know if anybody in the commission feels we need to take action on this second one. It seems action is being taken, that we don't have to make a recommendation on that unless someone disagrees and wants to, because I think I'd like to move on. It is late and my computer is beeping at me saying your battery's running out, which means the meeting has to end. And then the third thing from Black Lives Matter is about fund allocation. I think that is way above our pay grade in how the city approaches social problems, et cetera. I hope city council looks at that third one and says, do they need to sit and look at the budget and say, how do we incorporate more mental health, or how do we help the police department since we're asking them to do things, and then maybe give us specific instructions And so I kind of want to leave that for a later meeting. The last thing I want to bring up about the complaint process is I actually would like, drop my water bottle. I actually would like us to think about, and at the next meeting, possibly make a motion and make a recommendation to City Council about the entire commission. When the murder of George Floyd happened, I think it was very good that this commission existed in Oxford so we could have input, citizens could have input, and we were ahead of the game in a sense and have a place to work on policing. And citizens in Oxford say, wow, there is someone who are trying to make things better. When I look at the commission's responsibility, in my opinion, and I'm going to ask everyone to do some homework, is to actually read the ordinance and say, okay, if something bad happened in Oxford, really bad, is the ordinance written in such a way that this commission can be part of helping the town process through that and work through that? It is, in a sense, is there enough teeth to the review part of this commission? We've spent a lot of time on the community relations, but we're also the review commission. Well, in Oxford, we don't get a lot of complaints because we haven't had many incidences, but I would rather us look at it, see if it needs strengthened before anything happens, which of course we hope never happens, as opposed to something serious happening and everyone going, well, you really can't be part of this process, and the citizens being frustrated. So we're going to get that homework and put that on our next meeting. Whether we should make a motion asking City Council to maybe get the police chief, the law director, the city manager, a couple members of the commission to look at the wording of the ordinance and reworking it. So that's the last thing about complaints, unless anybody has anything. Otherwise, if anybody has any final comments.
Yeah, I'll make a couple final comments. To your last point, Mr. Mead, I've been doing some research on different kinds of review boards that exist. There's a document out of Oregon, which seems to be pretty progressive in a lot of ways. There's the CAHOOTS model came out of that, that I've been looking at. And so I'm happy to share that with you, with everyone here on the commission, with Chief Jones too. And then anyone who'd like to email me who's listening on the public call, I can share that with them. And then also, for those of you on the public call as well, there's a website called the Officer Down Memorial Page, ODMP, which talks about deaths in the line of duty or duty-related deaths by year of officers. And I take the time to visit that sometimes weekly. And we're already beyond the number of officers who died for all of 2019. I think we're at about 159 now, and it's nationally, and 82 of those deaths are related to COVID-19. So as we think about our frontline workers, including our officers who are engaging with the public, especially those in corrections where we have overcrowding and what have you, there are a lot of officers that are suffering as a result of COVID-19 in particular. And so just to keep them in your thoughts. And Chief Jones, thank you for you and your officers, the work that you're doing here in Oxford.
Anybody else have any final comments before we? Okay, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank everybody who signed in, people who gave input. You know, obviously what we're trying to do here is improve community relations and policing in Oxford and being that venue for people to bring things to. And I know a lot of times it seems negative, but you know, as I told Debbie Anderson when I met her uptown, the people that have positive relationship with the police or feel everything's perfect don't need us to help them improve that relationship. It's already really good. And unfortunately, sometimes then it seems we focus on the negative. But I appreciate Chief Jones and Jessica, the work you did on those things. I think those are good steps forward. And our next meeting is November 19th, 2020. We will be at City Council September 1st, if anyone wants to chime in there. Okay. Otherwise, I just need a motion. Yes.
Pat, I was wondering, would we consider having another PCRRC in between now and November? Only because I didn't know if we wanted to continue the conversation. I know you said that the third suggestion from Black Lives Matter was more for the city, but like other things that we didn't get to.
If the majority of the commission wants to convene again, you know, it's okay with me if we do it, you know, sometime September, October.
I mean,
You know, but if we can wait till November and discuss the third proposal and, you know, the actual ordinance. And I know that you wanted to put officer wellness back on the table, and certainly that's a big issue.
Officer
But people
wellness.
feel that there's a greater need. But on the third one, part of me thinks we're going to need more direction from city council. I sort of think, well, I want to sit back and see what they're going to do with this, because that's budget issues and priority issues. And I think that's more in their preview. And maybe in the next month, we'll see the direction they're taking. And if they think we should provide some advice on that, we might get more direction from them. I think many things in that third one are the crux of how things could improve for society. But
Okay.
it's up to
Yeah.
the commission.
I would support that. I know I wanted to check in on officer wellness. I still want to talk about the use of force reports and including officer
Right.
race, age, and sex. Continuing to talk about the diversity trainings.
Okay.
And then continuing to have a conversation about the complaint process.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll put down right now that the next meeting is November 19th. I'll kind of do a straw poll individually if people think we need to meet earlier. We also got to respect, you know, like Jessica's time or yeah, being on the school board. I can tell you, and Chief Jones's time, being on the school board right now, being in government right now during this COVID is extremely time consuming. And I don't want to take them away from other work that they need to do if we can wait. But if we really need it, we can see how that goes. Otherwise, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion made.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
All right, would you call the roll, please, Jessica?
Yes, Ms. DeLong,
She already checked out.
all right, Ms. Franklin,
I couldn't get unmuted. Aye.
Yeah, I muted myself. Yes.
Aye.
all right, Mr. Wong,
Yeah.
or Mr. Wang, I'm sorry, Mr. Nadler,
Yes.
Mr. Cron,
Yes, and thank you, everybody.
Ms. Story,
Yes, thank you, everyone.
and Mr. Mead.
Yes, and thank you to everyone. Have a good night. Thank you,
Have a
Jessica.
good night.
Thank you.